Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com. Here with, if I could only choose one work by composer X, it would have to be work G. Let's call it G this time. This, of course, is to answer the challenge issued by the evil god Cancrozans, who's about to destroy all of classical music, save for one work per composer. And we have to select that work. And then, hopefully, in selecting that work, persuade him or her or it or they or whatever the heck it is, that they should be merciful and let us have more. Because we always want more, don't we? It's the problem. The problem is what we do with the more, isn't it? Anyway, the composer in this particular case is Alban Berg. And the work absolutely, positively has to be Wozzeck. I mean, is there really any other choice? Now, I know there's other stuff, and some of you have suggested, for example, the Violin Concerto, which is a masterpiece, a screaming masterpiece, and wonderful and beautiful, or maybe the three pieces for orchestra. I don't think any of you picked Lulu, which doesn't surprise me a bit, especially because Cancrozans is not a god who's going to respond to that kind of plot, which is rather prurient, isn't it? And it's also a much more difficult work to listen to than Wozzeck in a lot of ways. But that's not really the issue. The issue is that Wozzeck, I think, is such a humane, touching, intensely tragic, and it's in a way, it's the ultimate verismo piece. It's such a true slice of the awfulness of life and the attempts of poor people whose lives are completely at the mercy of others to attempt to make sense of it all, to find beauty, to find happiness, and failing to do so. And our response to that is the huge outpouring of emotional sympathy and the absolutely devastating conclusion when Wozzeck has murdered Marie and drowned himself, and all that's left is Marie's little child playing on his hobby horse with the other children running around saying to him, "Hey, your mother's dead." And they all say, "Let's go see." And they all run off. And he stays alone on the stage with his hobby horse going hop, 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 as the orchestra just goes and stops in the middle of nothingness. And we don't know what's going to happen to this poor child. And we know he has nothing. It's oh God, it's sad. It's so touching and so sad. And the person who could create this in a way that, first of all, uses an atonal or 12-tone style, number one, which everybody thinks is supposed to be so difficult and terrible, which really isn't, not in this opera anyway. But anyone who could do that and do it in such a direct and heartfelt way, I think if we show this particular work to the evil god Cancrozans, he's going to look at this and say, human beings, yeah, they're bad. I mean, this opera says they're bad, but somebody who could make us feel that and therefore want us to be better than that, which is the whole point, of course, of Wozzeck, I think, to have that compassion, that sympathy that would never allow such a thing to happen. That anybody who could show this to us in such a bald and unflinching way, well, his work deserves to survive. And not just Wozzeck, but the whole range of what he did. And, one of the things about Wozzeck that's so fascinating is that it operates on so many levels. There is, of course, the contrast between tonality and atonality, because as the work progresses, it becomes more and more directly emotional. It's very, very cleverly done. Each act of it each act is a different kind of independent form. There's an act that's a symphony, and the finale is a series of inventions, and those inventions are on one note, on one chord, on a key, on an ostinato rhythm. They're on things that are very, very recognizable and accessible. And the concluding interlude, which is in a pretty straight D minor, is just shattering because of the contrast between the style of the less tonal episodes and finally the crystallization of the whole thing in terms of traditional harmony. And it says something about what Berg was about and what he did and his genius, that he recognized that atonality works best when it's used as a means of contrast to tonality. In other words, yes, there was total serialism and all of this stuff, but the fact of the matter is that tonality is a gift of God. Ask Cancresans, he will tell you that. And when you limit yourself and say, I'm denying this entire means of expression, then you're stunting your own emotional expression, as often as not. Sometimes yes, sometimes not. It depends on the composer. I mean, we don't have to get into that. But what Berg understood is that the name of the game is contrast. And contrast in aid of a story, telling a story, and the emotional expression of that story. And that's nowhere more important than in an opera. I mean, opera, things are happening, and the music is supposed to be illustrating the things that are happening. And it does that by means of contrast. And tonality is one of those contrasts. And if you're going to write music at a wider scale and go beyond tonality, you can't forget where you came from and the very real value of using it as a tool, using everything as a tool. The way Mahler thought of symphonies as the world, you embrace everything. And Wozzeck is one of those Mahlerian works, and Berg was a huge, huge Mahler fan. I mean, Mahler's fingerprints are all over his music. He understood that. He understood the value of contrast. He understood the value of contrast in aid of storytelling and expression. And Wozzeck does that in a way which is absolutely shattering. It's one of the great masterpieces of the lyric stage, and certainly the work which must survive, and the work which I think pleads most eloquently, not just for the survival of everything else that Berg wrote, but for the survival of everything that everybody else wrote. It really does. It's that extraordinary. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.